It was a bright afternoon and the sound of laughter filled the large white house. The family was busy preparing for a small gathering. The living room looked beautiful, with sunlight streaming through tall glass windows and a shiny grand piano standing in the corner. The piano was mostly there for decoration, a sign of wealth and class. Hardly anyone ever played it, but today, that piano was about to become the center of something no one expected. The maid moved quietly around the house, dusting the furniture and arranging flowers in the vases. She was a gentle woman, always polite and soft-spoken. She had been working for this family for almost 2 years. She did her work carefully, never complained, and always kept a calm smile on her face. To everyone else, she was just another worker in the background, invisible most of the time, unnoticed at parties like this one. The family's teenage daughter was busy showing off her new dress to her friends. Her friends, all from wealthy families, were sitting on the couch, scrolling on their phones and laughing about random things. One of them pointed toward the piano and said with a smirk, "Hey, who even plays that thing? It just sits there collecting dust." The daughter laughed and said, "Oh, no one. My dad bought it just because it looked fancy." Another friend added jokingly, "Maybe your maid can play something for us? That would be funny." Everyone laughed, not realizing the maid was nearby, arranging plates on the table. The daughter grinned and said, "You know what, that could be fun." She turned toward the maid and called out, "Hey, do you know how to play the piano?" The maid looked up, slightly surprised. Her hands froze for a moment, holding a stack of napkins. She hesitated before answering softly, "A little, ma'am." That short answer made the group laugh louder. One of the friends whispered, "Oh, this is going to be good." They had no idea how those simple words would change everything. The daughter smiled and said teasingly, "Well, why don't you play something for us later? We could use some entertainment." The maid just nodded politely and went back to her work. Her calmness made them even more curious. They didn't know whether she was serious or just shy, but to them it was all just part of a harmless prank. Later that evening, the guests started arriving, the house filled with chatter and laughter. The smell of freshly cooked food spread through the air. The maid kept herself busy serving drinks and making sure everything ran smoothly. But in the corner of her mind, she couldn't stop thinking about what had happened earlier. She had not touched a piano in years. The thought of playing again made her heart race, not because she was nervous about being laughed at, but because a part of her longed for it, that feeling she had once loved so much. As she moved past the piano while serving, her fingers brushed against the keys for a second. The familiar smoothness sent a wave of memories rushing back. She remembered long hours of practice in her younger days, the joy of hearing music flow from her fingertips, and the proud smile of her father when she first performed in front of an audience. But those days were gone. Life had taken a different turn and the piano became a forgotten dream. The night grew livelier. Someone mentioned the earlier joke again, and soon everyone was talking about it. The daughter clapped her hands and said, "Okay, everyone, our maid says she can play the piano. Let's see what she can do." A few people chuckled. The maid, who was serving near the dining area, froze for a second. Every eye in the room turned toward her. She looked at the daughter, who smiled playfully, not out of kindness but amusement. The maid hesitated. Her heart pounded. She could have said no, made an excuse, or laughed it off, but something inside her told her to do it. Maybe it was a quiet sense of pride, or maybe she wanted to remind herself of who she once was. She placed the tray on the table and walked slowly toward the piano. The laughter softened. Some people took out their phones, ready to record what they thought would be a funny moment. The maid pulled out the bench quietly and sat down. Her hands rested gently on her lap. She took a deep breath. For a few seconds, the room was silent except for the soft hum of conversation from the kitchen. Then she placed her fingers on the keys. Her touch was careful, as if greeting an old friend after many years. She pressed one note, just one, and the sound filled the air. It was pure and steady, not what anyone expected. The laughter stopped. Her fingers moved to another note and another. A soft melody began to form. The guests looked at each other. The daughter's smile faded a little. There was something about the way the maid played that felt different. Her hands moved with grace and precision, not like someone trying for the first time, but like someone who had lived and breathed music for years. As she continued, the melody grew stronger. Each note carried emotion. It wasn't a flashy song, but it had soul. It was gentle, full of sadness and warmth at the same time. People found themselves unable to look away. The laughter that once filled the room was replaced by quiet awe. The maid didn't notice their reactions. She had closed her eyes and let herself get lost in the music. For the first time in years, she felt alive in a way words couldn't describe. The piano wasn't just an instrument anymore. It was a voice for everything she had kept inside. The struggles, the sacrifices, the years of silence, they all came out through her fingers. When she finished, the last note lingered in the air. She kept her eyes closed for a few seconds before slowly lifting her hands off the keys. The room stayed silent. No one clapped right away. It wasn't because they didn't like it. It was because they were stunned. Finally, one of the guests whispered, "That was beautiful." Then the others started to clap. The sound grew louder, echoing through the room. The maid stood up quietly, her expression calm, though her eyes held a faint sadness. She nodded politely and stepped back, ready to return to her work. The daughter and her friends didn't know what to say. They looked at each other, embarrassed. What they had meant as a joke had turned into something unforgettable. One of them finally said softly, "She's really good." The maid continued serving for the rest of the evening, but something had changed in the air. People treated her differently. They spoke to her with respect now. A few guests even tried to start small conversations with her, asking how long she had been playing. She only smiled and said, "It's been a long time." Later that night, when everyone had left and the family was cleaning up, the daughter approached her. She looked nervous. "I'm sorry if we embarrassed you earlier," she said quietly. "We didn't mean to. We just thought it would be funny." The maid gave her a gentle smile and said, "It's all right. Sometimes we forget that music can surprise us." The daughter nodded, unsure what else to say. She had learned something that night, though she couldn't put it into words. It was more than just realizing that the maid had a hidden talent. It was the feeling of guilt for laughing at someone who carried so much grace in silence. When the maid finally went home, the streets were quiet. She walked slowly under the dim street lights, her shoes clicking softly against the pavement. She felt tired but peaceful. That single moment at the piano had awakened something inside her, a reminder of who she truly was before life had buried her dreams under years of hard work and quiet acceptance. As she reached her small apartment, she sat by the window and looked at her hands. They were rough and tired, but tonight they had found their voice again. She smiled softly to herself. Maybe this wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was just the beginning of something she had almost forgotten she could still have. And while the rich family slept in their big house, still thinking about the music they heard that evening, the maid sat by the window, lost in quiet thought. The sound of the piano still echoed in her heart, reminding her that no matter how far life takes someone away from their dreams, a part of it always stays alive, waiting for one single moment to be heard again. The next morning, the house was unusually quiet. The memory of the maid's piano performance still lingered in everyone's minds. Even the family's daughter, who had started the prank, couldn't stop thinking about it. She had spent most of the night replaying the moment in her head, the way the maid's fingers had moved, the calm look on her face, the sound that filled the room. It was nothing like what she had expected. Somehow that simple performance had left a mark on her heart. Downstairs, the maid was already at work. She moved around with her usual calmness, dusting the furniture and tidying up the mess from the night before, but inside she felt different. For the first time in years, she had touched a piano, and the feeling had stayed with her. It wasn't just about the music. It was about remembering a part of herself she had lost long ago. As she wiped the glass table near the piano, she paused and looked at the instrument again. The polished surface reflected her face faintly. She smiled a little, remembering the sound of the keys beneath her fingers. The family's daughter came down the stairs slowly, holding a cup of coffee. She hesitated when she saw the maid near the piano. Normally, she wouldn't say much to her besides giving instructions. But today felt different. "You played really well last night," she said quietly. The maid turned around and smiled softly. "Thank you," she replied. There was an awkward silence. The daughter wanted to ask more but didn't know how. Finally, she said, Did you learn music somewhere?" The maid nodded slowly. "A long time ago," she said. "Before I started working like this, I studied music. I used to play every day." The daughter's eyes widened a little. "Really, like In school? Yes, the maid said. At a conservatory. I wanted to become a piano teacher. But life had other plans. The daughter felt a wave of guilt. The night before, she and her friends had laughed at her, thinking she was just pretending. But now, knowing the truth, she felt small. I'm sorry about what happened, she said quietly. We shouldn't have made fun of you. The maid's expression stayed calm. It's all right, she said kindly. Sometimes people laugh before they understand. The daughter didn't know what to say. For the first time, she saw the maid not as a worker, but as a person with a life and dreams of her own. She finished her coffee silently and left the room, her thoughts heavy. As the day went on, the maid continued with her work. But word about her performance had spread beyond the house. One of the guests from last night had posted a short video on social media. It showed the maid sitting at the piano, playing beautifully while the crowd watched in silence. The caption read, "You never know who might surprise you." Within hours, the video started getting likes and comments. People were touched by the unexpected talent and humility of the woman in the video. By evening, the video had reached thousands of views. People began sharing it with captions like, "True talent has no class or status." The family didn't realize how quickly it was spreading until a neighbor mentioned it at dinner. "Hey," the neighbor said with a laugh, "your maid's a bit of a star now." That piano video is everywhere. The family's daughter nearly dropped her fork. "Wait, what video?" she asked. "The one from last night," the neighbor replied. "Someone uploaded it online. People love it." The father frowned. "Someone recorded that?" The daughter nodded slowly, feeling a mix of surprise and guilt. She hadn't thought much of it when her friends had taken their phones out, but now she wondered how the maid would feel, knowing her private moment had gone public. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, the daughter found the video online. It had already reached over 100,000 views. The comments were filled with admiration and emotion. "This gave me chills. Her playing is so heartfelt. So much grace in her simplicity." Some even asked, "Who is she?" The daughter scrolled through the comments for a long time. She felt proud but also uneasy. She knew the maid never asked for this attention. It had started as a joke, and now it had turned into something completely different. The next morning, when the maid arrived, she seemed unaware of the video. She started her chores like usual, humming softly to herself. The daughter hesitated before telling her. "People really liked your piano playing," she said gently. "Someone recorded it and shared it online. It's getting a lot of attention." The maid looked surprised. "They recorded it?" she asked quietly. The daughter nodded. "Yes, it's all over social media. Everyone's talking about how beautiful your music was." The maid didn't know what to say. For a moment, she felt a mix of confusion and worry. She had never wanted to be in the spotlight. But at the same time, she felt a quiet sense of pride. Maybe, in some small way, her music had touched people again. "Would you like to see it?" the daughter asked, showing her the video on her phone. The maid watched silently as the short clip played. Her face remained calm, but her eyes grew moist. Hearing those notes again, seeing herself play, reminded her of everything she had once loved. When the video ended, she smiled faintly and said, "It's strange to see myself like that." "It's amazing," the daughter said softly. "You're really talented." The maid looked down and said, "Music used to be my whole world. But when my father got sick, I had to stop studying. I started working to help pay for his medicine. After he passed away, I never went back." She paused, her voice low. "Sometimes life doesn't give you time to dream." The daughter listened quietly. For the first time, she understood what kind of strength hid behind the maid's calmness. It wasn't just humility. It was years of silent endurance. Over the next few days, more people began recognizing the maid. The family received calls from local reporters asking to interview her. The daughter's father wasn't too happy about the sudden attention. "We can't have the media here," he said firmly. "It's bad for privacy." But the daughter disagreed. "Dad, she deserves this," she said. She didn't ask for fame, but people love her music. Maybe she deserves a chance to have her dream back. The father sighed but didn't respond. He knew his daughter was right, but he also worried about the chaos it could bring. That evening, the maid was cleaning near the piano again when the daughter came to her with a thoughtful look. "Would you ever want to play again?" she asked. The maid looked surprised. "Play again?" "Yes," the daughter said. "Like properly on stage, for people who would really listen. The maid smiled faintly. That was a long time ago. I don't think anyone would want to see someone like me play now. That's not true, the daughter said quickly. People already love you. They don't care about what you do for a living. They care about how you make them feel. And your music makes people feel something real. The maid looked at her, touched by her sincerity. You're very kind, she said. But sometimes it's enough just to know that what I played reached someone's heart. The daughter didn't push further. But something about the maid's words stayed with her. She wanted to help her somehow, to give her a chance to play again, not as a maid or a background figure, but as the musician she truly was. As the sun set, the maid finished her work and prepared to leave. Before she left, she stopped by the piano one last time. She touched the keys softly, not to play, but just to feel them. The sound of that single note filled the empty room again, gentle and pure. It reminded her of hope, the quiet kind that never really dies no matter how many years pass. Outside, the sky turned orange and gold. The maid walked down the street toward her small apartment, unaware that her story was already spreading beyond her city. Somewhere, people were watching her video, inspired by her grace. Some cried, some smiled, and many shared it, saying, "This is what real talent looks like." And as the world slowly began to notice her, she still lived her life the same way, simple, humble, and filled with quiet strength, not knowing that her second chance was already on its way. Days passed, but the maid's piano video continued to spread. People all over the country were sharing it. Some called her the maid with magic hands, while others wrote touching messages about how her music gave them hope. She didn't know how big it had become until one afternoon when she went to the grocery store. The cashier looked at her closely and said, "Excuse me, are you the lady from that piano video?" She froze for a second, unsure how to respond. "I think so," she said softly. The cashier smiled brightly. "That video made me cry. You play with so much heart." The maid thanked her quietly, her cheeks slightly red. It was strange to be recognized. For years she had been invisible. Now people were noticing her for something she had almost forgotten she could do. When she returned to work that day, the family's daughter was waiting by the piano. She had something in her hand, a small flyer. "Look," she said, showing it to the maid. It was an announcement for a local charity concert that supported music education for underprivileged children. "They're looking for volunteer performers," she said. "You should play there." The maid's eyes widened. "Oh no, I can't," she said quickly. "I haven't performed in so many years." "But you can," the daughter insisted. "You're amazing. People would love to hear you again." The maid hesitated. The thought of playing in front of strangers made her nervous. "I wouldn't even know what to play," she said softly. "Then let me help you," the daughter said. "I'll talk to the organizers. You don't have to worry about anything. Just play." The maid smiled but didn't answer right away. She wasn't used to anyone believing in her. That night, when she went home, she sat on her small bed and thought about it. She remembered the feeling she had when she touched the piano keys that first night. The warmth, the power, the sense of peace. Deep down, she knew she wanted to feel that again. The next morning, she told the daughter, "All right, I'll do it." The daughter's face lit up. "Really?" she said. "That's wonderful." "I'll call them today." As the days went by, the maid practiced whenever she could. After finishing her chores, she would stay late, sitting by the piano, playing softly so no one would hear. The music came back slowly, like an old friend returning. Her fingers moved more confidently with each day. Sometimes the daughter would sit nearby, listening quietly, amazed at how the maid made every note sound alive. One evening, while the maid was practicing, the daughter's father walked into the room. He had just come home from work and was surprised to hear music. He stopped at the doorway, watching silently. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. When the song ended, he cleared his throat and said, "That was beautiful." The maid quickly stood up, flustered. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just practicing." "I'll stop." He shook his head. "No, don't stop. You have a gift. My daughter told me you'll be playing at a charity event." "Yes, sir," she said softly. "It's just for a good cause," he nodded. "You have my full support. If you need time off to prepare, take it." The maid was surprised by his kindness. "Thank you," she said. "That means a lot." In the days leading up to the event, the house felt different. Everyone was curious about her performance. Even the guests who had once laughed now treated her with respect. Some asked if she needed help with transportation or clothes for the event. The daughter insisted on lending her a simple, elegant dress for the evening. "It's not too fancy," she said, "but I think it'll look perfect on you." The night of the concert arrived. The venue was a small hall filled with warm lights and soft chatter. There were musicians, singers, and local artists performing for charity. When the maid arrived, she felt nervous. Her heart was racing. She looked around at the people in the audience, strangers, families, children, and wondered if she really belonged there. The daughter stood by her side, reassuring her. "You'll be fine," she whispered. "Just do what you love." When her name was announced, a quiet hush fell over the room. People whispered, recognizing her from the viral video. She walked onto the stage slowly, her hands trembling slightly. The spotlight felt bright and heavy, but when she sat down at the piano, all the noise around her seemed to fade. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first few notes were soft and uncertain, but as she continued, her confidence grew. The melody flowed like water, smooth and natural. Her fingers danced across the keys, each note filled with emotion. The audience sat perfectly still, mesmerized by the way she played. It wasn't just music, it was a story of struggle, loss, and quiet strength. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply letting her heart speak. Halfway through the performance, she closed her eyes. Memories flashed through her mind. Her father teaching her how to play, the long nights of practice, the pain of giving it all up. But instead of sadness, she felt peace. Every note she played was a reminder that life could take things away, but it couldn't take away who she was inside. When the last note faded, there was a long silence. Then slowly the audience began to clap. The sound grew louder and louder until it filled the entire hall. People stood up, cheering and applauding. Some even had tears in their eyes. The maid stood and bowed slightly, her eyes glistening. For the first time in many years, she felt seen, not as a maid, but as an artist. After the show, people came up to her wanting to shake her hand, take pictures, or simply thank her for the performance. One woman said, "You reminded me of my mother. She used to play piano before she passed. Thank you for bringing that memory back." The maid smiled, touched by her words. Another person asked, "Do you teach lessons?" "My son would love to learn from someone like you." The daughter watched proudly from the side. She could see how much the maid's heart was shining through her music. When they finally left the venue, the maid was quiet, holding a small bouquet of flowers someone had given her. "You were amazing," the daughter said. "I'm so proud of you," the maid smiled. "Thank you. I almost forgot what this felt like. It's been so long since I've played for others." On their way home, the maid looked out the car window at the city lights passing by. She felt grateful for the chance to share her music again, for the kindness that had grown from what started as a prank, and for the people who now saw her differently. She knew life would go back to normal soon, but something inside her had changed forever. When she returned home that night, she placed the flowers in a small glass jar and set them by her window. She sat on her bed, closed her eyes, and whispered a quiet thank you to her father, to the piano, and to life for giving her another chance to be who she truly was. The next morning, she woke up to a phone call. It was from one of the concert organizers. "We wanted to thank you again for last night," the voice said warmly. "Your performance moved everyone. We're planning another event next month, and we'd love for you to play again. Would you be interested?" The maid held the phone tightly, her heart full. "Yes," she said softly. "I'd be honored." As she hung up, she sat quietly for a moment, smiling to herself. Her journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. From that day forward, every time she looked at a piano, she didn't see a reminder of what she had lost. She saw hope, courage, and the chance to share a piece of her soul with the world again. And though she would still return to her daily work, wiping tables and cleaning rooms, she carried something new inside her, a light that no one could ever take away. The maid who once played as a prank had now found her place again, one note at a time. Weeks passed after the charity concert, and life slowly began to settle again. The maid still worked at the same house, but things no longer felt the same. Every morning, when she walked past the grand piano, it no longer felt like a piece of furniture. It felt alive, like an old friend who had returned to her life. Sometimes when the house was quiet, she would sit for a few minutes and play softly before getting back to work. The sound always brought a sense of calm to her heart, The daughter often joined her, sitting nearby with a gentle smile. She had grown to admire the maid deeply, not just for her talent, but for her strength and humility. The maid never bragged or talked about herself. She simply worked with quiet grace and played when she felt the need to express what words couldn't. One morning, as they were talking, the daughter said, "You know, a local music school saw your concert online. They sent a message asking if you'd be willing to teach piano classes there." The maid looked up in surprise. "Teach?" she repeated softly. The daughter nodded eagerly. "Yes, they said they could use someone like you. They want you to come by and meet the director." The maid's heart started to race. Teaching piano had once been her biggest dream, but after so many years, she had buried that dream deep inside, thinking it would never return. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." The daughter smiled warmly. "I think you are. You've already inspired so many people. Maybe it's time to share what you know." That evening, the maid went home and sat by her window. The sky was painted with shades of gold and pink. She thought about all that had happened, the prank, the first note, the concert, the people who had believed in her. She realized that fear was the only thing standing in her way now. "Maybe it's time," she whispered to herself. A few days later, she visited the music school. It was a small but lively place, filled with the sounds of instruments and laughter. Children ran down the hallways carrying sheet music, while older students practiced in rooms lined with pianos and violins. The maid felt a wave of nostalgia as she stepped inside. It reminded her of her own days as a student long ago. The school director greeted her warmly. "It's an honor to meet you," he said. "We saw your video and the charity performance. You play with a kind of emotion that can't be taught. We'd love for you to guide our beginners and teach them not just notes but feeling." The maid smiled humbly. "I'm not a professional anymore," she said softly. "I haven't taught in many years," the director nodded. "That doesn't matter. Music never leaves us. It waits for the right moment to come back." Something about those words touched her deeply. She agreed to try. They decided she would start by teaching one small class a week. When she returned home, she felt a quiet joy blooming inside her. It wasn't about fame or recognition anymore. It was about finding meaning again. The following week, she stood in front of her first group of students. There were 6 children, all around 10 or 11 years old, each one excited but shy. She began the lesson slowly, showing them how to sit properly, how to touch the keys gently, how to listen to the sound. The children listened carefully, their eyes wide with fascination. For the maid, it felt like breathing again. Each time she guided their hands or corrected their posture, she felt her heart grow lighter. After class, one of the students approached her and said, "Miss, will we ever play like you?" The maid smiled and replied, "If you play with your heart, you already do." The child grinned proudly and ran off to tell his parents. Watching him go, she realized something beautiful. She was no longer just chasing her dream. She was helping others find theirs. Back at the house, the daughter and her parents were proud of her. They often asked how the classes were going. The father, who once barely noticed her, now listened when she talked about her lessons. "You know," he said one evening, "we're glad you stayed with us. You've brought something special into this home." The maid thanked him quietly, feeling grateful for how much things had changed. Meanwhile, her story continued to spread online. More people learned about her journey, from a maid to a pianist who touched the hearts of millions. Journalists wanted interviews, but she always kept things simple. "I'm just someone who loves music," she would say. "It doesn't matter where you come from. Music belongs to everyone." Months passed, and her small class grew. The music school offered her a permanent position, and she accepted it happily. Still, she chose to continue working part-time for the family that had supported her. To her, it wasn't just a job anymore. It was a place filled with people who had become like family. One evening, as the sun began to set, she sat at the piano again in the big living room. The daughter joined her quietly, holding a cup of tea. "You've changed a lot of lives," the daughter said softly. "Including mine." The maid looked up surprised. "Mine?" she asked. The daughter nodded. "Yes. Before, I never really understood what it meant to respect people for who they are. I used to think money and appearance made someone special. But you showed me that kindness, patience, and talent are what truly matter." The maid smiled warmly. "I think we all learn in our own time," she said. "Sometimes life teaches us in unexpected ways." For a moment, the two of them sat in silence, listening to the gentle hum of the piano strings. The air was calm, filled with the quiet beauty of shared understanding. A few weeks later, the music school organized a special recital featuring both students and teachers. The maid decided to let her students perform first. She guided them carefully, watching proudly as they played simple melodies with confidence. When it was her turn, she sat down and took a deep breath. She played a piece she had written herself, a soft, emotional tune that told the story of her journey. The audience listened quietly, many wiping away tears. When the performance ended, everyone stood to applaud. Her students hugged her tightly, calling her their favorite teacher. The director came forward with a small framed certificate that read, "For inspiring through music." She accepted it with tears in her eyes. It wasn't the award that moved her. It was the realization that she had finally become the teacher she once dreamed of being. After the event, the daughter ran up to her with excitement. "You were amazing," she said. "You made everyone cry." The maid laughed softly. "Then I suppose I did my job right," she replied. The daughter hugged her tightly, and in that moment, the bond between them felt like something deeper than friendship. It was respect, love, and shared humanity. Later that night, when the maid returned home, she looked around her small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful. On her table sat the small bouquet of dried flowers from her first concert, now preserved as a memory. She sat down by the window looking out at the stars. For the first time in years, she felt completely content. Her life hadn't turned out the way she once imagined, but in many ways, it had become even more meaningful. She wasn't the same woman who quietly dusted furniture and hid her dreams in silence. She was a musician, a teacher, and a reminder that dignity and passion can never truly fade. And as the night grew darker, she whispered a quiet promise to herself to keep playing, to keep teaching, and to never let her music be silenced again. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of a piano played in another home, another classroom, another dream being born, and she smiled, knowing that the music she once feared was lost had finally found its way back into the world, carried by countless hands, hearts, and hopes. Months passed since the recital, and life took on a peaceful rhythm. The maid's days were filled with music, laughter, and the quiet joy of teaching. She spent her mornings at the music school, guiding students with patience and care, and her evenings helping at the house that had become her second home. The piano in the living room was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge that connected hearts, a reminder of how far she had come. The family she worked for continued to treat her with deep respect. The daughter often visited her classes, sometimes helping younger students with reading music. The bond between them had grown stronger, more like that of a mentor and student or even family. The father, once distant and busy, often stopped to listen when she played. He would quietly stand by the doorway, eyes closed, letting the music fill the house. It had changed all of them in some way. But one afternoon, while the maid was teaching, the director of the school entered her classroom with a bright smile. "You've received a letter," he said, handing her an envelope. She took it carefully, curiosity flickering in her eyes. The paper was crisp, and the letterhead was from a well-known concert hall in the city. As she read, her hands began to tremble slightly. It was an invitation to perform in a special event, a charity concert celebrating artists who had inspired others through resilience and kindness. The director watched her reaction. "You deserve this," he said warmly. "Your story has touched so many lives. They want you to share your gift again." For a moment, the maid was speechless. She had never imagined something like this would happen again. Her last public performance had been the one that changed everything, the one that began as a prank and ended as a revelation. Now life was giving her another chance, not as a maid trying to prove her worth, but as a teacher, a mentor, and an artist. That evening, she sat at the piano at home, thinking deeply. The daughter found her there, lost in thought. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. The maid smiled softly. "I've been asked to play again, at a big event, but I'm not sure I'm ready." The daughter shook her head. "You're more than ready. This time, people are inviting you because they admire you, not to laugh at you. You've already proven your strength. Now it's time to share your story again, for yourself." The maid looked down at her hands. They were the same hands that once scrubbed floors, washed dishes, and played songs that carried her pain and hope. Now they trembled not from fear but from gratitude. "All right," she said finally. "I'll do it." Over the next few weeks, she practiced every evening after work. Her fingers moved gracefully, but this time the music felt different. It wasn't just about perfection. It was about expression. She wanted her performance to tell a story of how a single act of kindness could change lives, of how dreams could survive even in silence. The daughter and her family supported her every step of the way. They attended rehearsals, offered encouragement, and helped her choose her outfit for the concert. "You've come so far," the mother said one night. "We're so proud of you." The maid smiled humbly, her eyes glistening. "Thank you. I never thought I'd hear those words again." Finally, the night of the concert arrived. The grand hall was filled with people, musicians, teachers, students, and families. The stage shimmered under warm golden lights and the air buzzed with anticipation. Backstage, the maid waited quietly, her heart steady but full. The daughter squeezed her hand. "You're going to be amazing," she whispered. When the announcer called her name, the maid stepped onto the stage. The applause that greeted her was gentle but full of admiration. She bowed politely, then sat down at the piano. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting the weight of the past and the beauty of the present blend together. Then she began to play. The first notes floated softly through the hall, calm, tender, filled with emotion. The melody grew, weaving together fragments of her journey. The pain, the hope, the laughter, and the love she had found along the way. Her fingers danced effortlessly, every note carrying meaning. The audience sat in silence, completely absorbed by her performance. As she played, memories filled her mind. The laughter that once mocked her, the moment the music silenced the crowd, the students' bright faces, the kindness that helped her rise again. She realized that every moment, even the painful ones, had led her to this. The song became not just a performance, but a message, that everyone has worth no matter their past or position. When the final note faded, the hall remained still for a heartbeat before erupting into applause. People stood to their feet, clapping and cheering. Some had tears in their eyes. The maid stood slowly and bowed, overwhelmed by the emotion in the room. It wasn't pride she felt, it was peace. After the show, many people came to speak to her. Some were students who wanted to learn from her. Others were teachers who admired her humility. Even the director of the concert hall shook her hand and said, "You reminded us tonight what music truly means." She smiled, touched by his words. Backstage, the daughter and her family rushed to hug her. "You did it," the daughter said joyfully. "You were incredible." The maid laughed softly, her heart full. "It felt different this time," she said. "Like the music wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone." As they left the hall, the city lights shimmered in the distance. The maid looked up at the sky, taking a deep breath. For years she had lived quietly, believing her dreams were gone. But now she understood that dreams don't disappear. They wait for us to believe in them again. In the following days, the concert was featured in newspapers and online stories. People wrote about her performance, calling it heartfelt and unforgettable. But she didn't let the attention change her. She continued teaching her students, cleaning the house, and helping others just as she always had. The difference now was that everywhere she went, she carried confidence and peace within her. One morning, after finishing her class, she sat with her students under the shade of a tree outside the school. One of the children asked, "Miss, why do you love music so much?" She thought for a moment before replying softly, "Because music listens when the world doesn't. It helps us speak without words." The children smiled, not fully understanding but feeling the truth in her voice. As the sun dipped low in the sky, she looked around at her students, the family that had stood by her, and the piano that had once been her secret. She realized that the true gift wasn't the applause or recognition. It was the chance to touch hearts and remind others that kindness and talent can come from anywhere. That evening, she returned to the quiet house and sat once again at the grand piano. Her reflection shimmered on its polished surface, a reminder of all she had endured. She began to play a gentle tune, her fingers gliding smoothly over the keys. The melody was soft, filled with gratitude and love. A song for the people who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. As the final note echoed through the room, she smiled. She had found her purpose again, not in grand stages or fancy titles, but in the small, everyday moments that made life beautiful, and she knew deep in her heart that as long as she had music, she would never be lost again. Time moved gently like a slow melody. The maid's days were peaceful now, filled with lessons, laughter, and soft music that drifted through every corner of her life. She had built a world that felt calm and full of meaning. People in town knew her not as a maid anymore, but as the woman whose music had changed hearts. Yet she never let the attention define her. She still woke early, still helped where she could, still lived simply and humbly. That was who she had always been. One bright morning, the music school announced a new event, a student showcase where all teachers and pupils would perform together. The maid smiled when she read the notice pinned on the wall. These moments were her favorite. She loved watching her students take the stage, nervous at first but glowing with pride when they finished. She believed each performance was more than a show. It was a chance for them to feel seen and heard. She began helping her students prepare one by one. They practiced every afternoon, their small hands learning to find rhythm and emotion in every note. She encouraged them gently. "Don't just play," she would say softly. "Feel. Let the music tell your story." Her patience seemed endless, and her students adored her for it. One of her youngest students, a quiet boy, struggled with confidence. He would often stop in the middle of a song, afraid of making mistakes. The maid would sit beside him, her voice calm and warm. "Do you know what I do when I make mistakes?" she asked one day. The boy shook his head. She smiled. "I turn them into new notes. Sometimes the most beautiful songs are born from things we didn't plan." The boy smiled shyly, and from that day, he tried harder. As the showcase approached, the maid decided she would perform last. She wanted her students to shine first. Each of them chose their own piece, some playful, some gentle, some full of passion. She felt proud watching how far they had come. The day before the event, she sat alone at the piano in the quiet school hall. The lights were dim, and the echoes of past rehearsals still lingered. She placed her hands on the keys and played a few soft chords, thinking about her journey. She thought about how it had all started, a prank meant to embarrass her, that had instead revealed her gift to the world. She remembered the faces of those who had laughed, then turned to tears when she played her first note. Life had changed so much since then. The laughter that once hurt her now felt distant, like an old story that no longer mattered. What remained was gratitude, for the music, the second chances, and the people who believed in her. The next evening, the concert hall buzzed with excitement. Parents filled the seats, children peeked from behind curtains, and teachers whispered last-minute instructions. The maid moved calmly among them, her gentle presence easing everyone's nerves. She helped tune the pianos, fixed a ribbon in one girl's hair, and whispered encouragement to a trembling student. Her smile carried warmth that steadied hearts. When the showcase began, her students performed beautifully. Each one poured their little heart into their music. The audience clapped and cheered after every piece, and the maid felt a lump form in her throat. When her last student finished, the applause echoed long and loud. Then the director announced her name for the final performance. She walked slowly to the piano. The hall fell silent, the air filled with anticipation. She sat down and took a deep breath. The moment felt different from all others, not because of nerves, but because of peace. She began to play a piece she had written herself called Home. The melody was soft at first, rising and falling like a gentle conversation. It spoke of hope, kindness, and the quiet beauty of ordinary days. As she played, her students listened with shining eyes. Some of the parents wiped away tears. The music carried more than sound. It carried emotion, memory, and truth. Every note seemed to wrap the room in warmth. For the maid, it was not about performance anymore. It was about gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to live a life she once thought was lost. When the final note faded, silence filled the hall again before it broke into thunderous applause. The children ran to her, hugging her tightly. The director came forward, his eyes shining. "You've built something beautiful here," he said softly. "Not just music, but courage." She smiled humbly, her heart full. Later that night, after everyone left, she stayed behind to tidy the stage. The piano lid reflected the soft glow of the ceiling lights. She ran her fingers over the keys one last time as if saying thank you. In that quiet moment, she realized something important. Her story was never about fame or proving anyone wrong. It was about finding light even in humble places. Over the following months, the maid continued teaching, performing, and helping wherever she could. Her students grew in skill and confidence, and she became known as one of the most beloved teachers in the school. But she never forgot where she came from. Whenever new staff or parents asked about her story, she would tell it simply with a soft smile. "I was once someone who cleaned houses," she would say. "Then one day I was asked to play, and everything changed." People listened, moved by her honesty. Many found inspiration in her words. Some of her students' parents even started piano lessons themselves, saying they wanted to understand the magic she shared with their children. Music began to spread beyond her classroom, flowing into homes and hearts all around the town. One afternoon, she received an unexpected visit. A woman entered the school, one of the guests who had once been at the prank party years ago. Her eyes were filled with regret. "I don't know if you remember me," she said quietly. "I was there the night everyone laughed." "I wanted to apologize," the maid looked at her gently. "That night changed my life," she replied softly. "If it hadn't happened, I might never have found my way back to music." The woman looked surprised, tears forming in her eyes. "You're not angry?" The maid shook her head. "No, we all learn one way or another. Life has a way of turning unkind moments into blessings." The woman nodded, overwhelmed. They hugged before she left, both changed by the meeting. In time, the maid's story became part of the school's legacy. Her students grew up, some becoming musicians, others simply carrying her lessons into their lives. To play with heart, to face mistakes with courage, to see beauty in humble beginnings. Her influence reached far beyond what she could see. Years later, as she grew older, she continued teaching but began training new instructors to carry on her approach. One day, she sat in a classroom watching a young teacher lead a group of children through a simple tune. Their laughter filled the room. She smiled quietly, knowing the music would continue even when she no longer could. That evening, she returned to the familiar piano one last time. The same piano where it all began. The house was quiet now, the family long grown, but the instrument still shone under the warm light. She placed her hands on the keys and played slowly, softly. Each note felt like a memory. Of fear turned to courage, shame turned to pride, and silence turned to song. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint sound of her music into the night. She closed her eyes, lost in the moment. When she stopped playing, she stayed there for a while, smiling. She had lived a full life, not perfect but meaningful. She had learned that even when the world tries to make you small, your spirit can rise again if you let kindness guide you. The maid's story didn't end with applause or fame. It ended with peace, the kind that comes from knowing you've touched hearts and left something good behind. And somewhere in another house, perhaps another maid, another dreamer, heard the faint sound of her melody and felt inspired to believe that she too could play, could dream, could be heard. And so her music lived on, not in concert halls or grand recordings, but in the hearts of those who learned to listen